Maïtée Saganash. Okay. I'm glad you made time for me. I'm glad you're on Radicle Narrative. We've been planning this for about, I would say, almost like 3 years since we started.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Long overdue.
Long overdue. And you're pretty popular out there. When you look at your social media or your Instagram, you have this cool thing going on where you're bilingual or trilingual, but you're doing a lot of French content.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like, and the funniest part is that my Instagram has always been private, so I go through every single request, and if I can't prove that it's like an actual human being, um, not a white
Yeah.
supremacist, or just someone that's like, I just don't want like people like leaning on like on the right wing, like on my social, well, at least Instagram, because I think, what happened with like my Twitter back then and with my Facebook just got really overwhelmed by the alt-right.
Yeah.
And I was getting like threats and stuff. So I wanted to keep my Instagram at least safer. So yeah, so I refuse most of the requests, but
Yeah.
it's still kind of a big following.
Yeah, you kinda got this unique following, and I feel like I remember following you, like, even back in the day when Idle No More was starting, when Twitter was Twitter and not X, and you being in my field and my understanding, you being this outlier, but you also doing, like, a lot of organizing and things like that relative to where you were, and then as we became more connected online, I realized you do, like, a lot of media work, you're on podcasts, and you're even on TV.
Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of things. But yeah, so I've enjoyed doing um commentary on politics in both languages. Also, although I don't write in French anymore because I got PTSD from it, because I was writing for like 5 years for Metro Montreal, and it was like back in 2016, 17, and yeah, it was pretty rough being a young Indigenous woman writing in the media about like white supremacy,
Mhm.
about colonization, decolonization, um, and, like, people would, like, write to the journal saying I should be, like, deplatformed and stuff like that, whereas I've been writing for the Nation for 6 years, which is a magazine that's only, um that's broadcast in the Cree territory, but also all the offices and everybody who's, on planes on their Quebec, in Cree offices, or, in points of services like Val-d'Or, Chibougamau, have access to the nation. So a lot of people read it, but it's mostly a conversation with my fellow Crees,
Mhm.
in Eeyou Istchee, and in 6 years, I've never got a single threat or a single hate mail, which, when I was at Metro Montreal, there was a social media tech that was, like, specifically assigned to my columns to, like, monitor the comments or, like, anything like that whenever I was publishing, so every week. So it's yeah, it got pretty overwhelming, and, like, it really affected me at the time, and how, I've always loved to write and and yap, and it just did not feel safe at the time, so I'm pretty happy that I kinda reconciled with what I love to do,
That's good.
um, through
Yeah.
Cree media.
Yeah, and Radical Narrative, our listeners are pretty cool, like, they're pretty supportive, and we got a really cool organic following of people who make their way here, and we just had a coffee house yesterday, and I met some people that were following for quite a while, and I had no idea who they are, where they're from, and it's pretty cool. There's, like, a very humanizing approach to our episodes and our conversations, so if anyone tries to give you flack, just message me directly. We'll
Oh, but
find them.
now, like it's I've grown very tough from my experiences in French media. So so now I'm like, girl, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, like there's no point in trying to speak common sense into these people. And I will always defend my
True.
dignity at at gunpoint. So I'm just like, girl, shut the fuck up.
Yeah. Yeah, valid, valid. So we're talking around this conversation that for our listeners who don't know, and we'll explain this the best we can, is you speak French and English. You're in a different region than I am. I'm
Mm,
Plains Cree and you're out east.
yeah.
Yeah, explain that.
So yeah, so we were my territory, Eeyou Istchee was annexed to Quebec, part of it in 1898, in 1912 as part of the laws on annexation. So, and because in the north we've only mostly been in contact with traders from the Northwest Company or the Hudson Bay. So it was most of our interactions were in English before, if we did have to
Mhm,
speak to them. So after and like back then when all the residential schools were closing in Canada, like in the 60s, Quebec was opening theirs for the first time.
mm,
So before they would send the native students in Ontario. So like some of my uncles and my aunties, like they went to Brantford residential schools, so they speak less French, but they speak good French anyways. But the other half, some started in Brantford and finished in La Tuque in Quebec, where they had to speak French when there was a change in administration at some point. So yeah, so it happens that my dad speaks really good French, and a lot of people in my community, in my region, sometimes I even get flabbergasted. I work at the Cree Health Board, and then, like, one of my colleagues I've had for the past 7 years, like, talks to me in French, and I'm like, "What? You speak French?" And they're like, "Yeah, I was in residential school with your dad." I was like, "Oh, yeah, sure." So, yeah, so so a lot of the people, my age and up in my community at least, are, trilingual.
yeah. Yeah, that's unique. That's unique, and we're gonna talk about that because I wanted you to explain that because we'll talk about it when we get there, but just to give a quick summary is trilingualism exists pretty uniquely over there, and I don't wanna say, like, effortlessly because I'm not from there, but there's this unique dynamic of y'all speaking English, Cree, and French, which is unique. So I guess, like, let's speak to your community. You mentioned, your family origins, your community in general. Tell us about, like, your people and lands where you come from.
So we are on the Quebec side of the James Bay, but all the way to inland communities. So what's funny is that I share more cultural similarities with Atskemic from Obidjuan than I do with, like, a Cree from Sesame. Because, like, we're so far apart, and I my community has been colonized very late because we are inland, so it took them a long time to reach us. Like, my community is only 47 years old, so that's very young. So my family was born out on the land, like my dad, my aunties. My grandmother could only speak Cree, and I took care of her until she passed away with my aunt. But yeah, so we have these all these unilingual elders. Most of the people are fluent, and we still have a huge portion of I think it's like about 30 percent of the population in our region that spends most of the year um, out on the um, out on the land. So they're mostly tallyman, people who manage the trap lines. So they get income security benefits for them to be able to occupy the land, because if we do, and that's another thing, we were the first modern treaty ever signed in Canada, And this year in November, it's going to be the 50th anniversary of the JBNQA. So we will have to renegotiate it because it was a 50-year agreement. But that agreement was born from Bourassa back at the time, just launching his hydro project in Quebec without consulting the Crees, and we won the court case. So, but then they won an appeal, and but so we were not happy about that. So we were like, all right, so if you're gonna do it anyways, we demand to have the steering of our own public services. So we have a Cree school board, we have a with a Cree curriculum, we have a Cree health board that manages that administers all the social and health services in the communities. We have a Cree Nation government. And so that framework was really key to distance yourself legally from the Indian Act, but mostly having our own. So we have a lot of like most of the people in our communities don't rely on resource extraction for work. We work in our public entities. As for myself, I work for the Cree Board of Health and Social Services of James Bay. So I work in communications there, and as a speechwriter. And yeah, so now we are recognized as an administrative region in health. So we have, just like Greater Montreal, Capitale Nationale, which is like Quebec in the suburbs. So we have a public health department that gets the same funding as the other administrative regions in Quebec. But we have what's really nice is that whenever Quebec passes a reform in health, we do not have to apply it. So we get steady funding. We have ownership of our health services, but we do not get affected in any way or governed by the health ministry. So part of that agreement is also that um, people who live off the land traditionally do get income security um, benefits to be able for them to occupy the land, because the more camps we have out there, the less forestry the forestry industry can cut, because we have to sit down with Quebec and the logging companies, and we're like, see, there's a camp, so you cannot cut in a certain radius. So people are encouraged to at least build a camp and spend time there to make sure that um, just these companies can take more and more.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a really interesting geopolitical context, right? I think a lot of our listeners will probably be interested to have like a bigger conversation about that in terms of how your
Yeah, because
governance
I think out west,
operates.
like, people are used to, like, "Oh, I'm Treaty 1, I'm Treaty 6,"
Mm.
but we never say, "Oh, I'm James Bay Northern Quebec Agreement Treaty." Like, we don't say we're all treaty people, because, yeah,
Mhm.
that's just, when they signed, when they annexed us, after the Rupert's Act, because the Rupert's Act had an article that said that there were, land claims that Canada would have to address them. So they signed the 12 treaties, but with Quebec, it was another context. So they didn't, and then they annexed our territory to Quebec, and then Quebec never dealt with the land claims up until the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement 50 years ago. So that made a key context for us to be able to sign a modern treaty with the province and Canada instead of just Canada.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's definitely like Canada's pretty big.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I was thinking. I really wanted you on this podcast too to highlight the fact that there is a vast landscape up here, right? And I know we get a lot of like political listeners, people who are like political theorists and like left leaning politics, but this is an example of like very specific geopolitical context that exists across Indian country and North America.
And it's it's unfortunate because we have a modern treaty, but right, like, across the James Bay,
Mm,
there's, Crees and Attawapskat or that don't have a modern treaty that could benefit from, this, and we have the same last names, like our ancestors used to were mobile, right? Like, we used to travel, but then and we can extend our indigenous rights all the way to there, even though they're kin, they're relatives, because it's another province. So I think the context of the Dominion of Canada, um, really impacts,
mhm.
the sovereignty of the Crees, because imagine if we were united as one, not sinded by treaties or stuff like that. So, um, and the land we occupy is massive. And Inuit have Inuit do speak of the land of the Inuit people as and the Inuit land as Inuit Nunangat, and they have like the polar circumference, um, assembly, stuff like that. So, they do have those instances where, they do meet as a people, whether they're from, Greenland or Nunavut or, Nunavik or other parts, which I find odd that we don't do as Crees, because, my friends from northern Manitoba, my Cree friends from northern Manitoba, they speak and I understand them. We speak of the same, Ariokan that we've heard, as children or in our life from elders. Um, so we know all the same stories. We know all of our the spirits out there by the same name. So it's really odd to me that we don't. But that's how Canada thrives. That's how, by putting distance between us. So I think one day we should unite as Cree country.
Yeah, the Cree Nation conversation, and it comes up a lot, like, off and on. I think more recently, you're hearing references to nationhood and in a contemporary sense, and it's like, well, how does that look? How does that function? Because we are dealing with, like, obviously a big conversation around Cree territory being vast, and, of course, this is a conversation between 2 Crees, and I know there's probably, like, Ojibways or other people that might take a little bit of offense to it. But it's a valid question to have, is that, we do have these territories, and ultimately these territories were linked to our nations. And now you said it, where you said, the Dominion of Canada, the province, and ultimately colonialism did really faction us to the point of where we don't even know one another anymore.
Mhm. And, like, mm, especially these days, and I would be with Bill C5, with Mark Carney, speaking of a united Canada, and, all putting in efforts for the economy, and, I think we should speak of a united Cree country as well. But that doesn't interfere with the Ojibwe, Anishinaabe sovereignty or Inuit, because we used to have diplomatic relations before. We've always co-managed the land. Like my grandmother, she could only speak Cree, but she could speak a little bit Anishinaabe, because back when they would travel in the summer, they would wait for them to get there, because they knew they had a long journey, so they would offer them fish, um, after their long, canoe journey. And when, at the end of summer, my grandmother and her family would bury like berries and stuff like that for them to have during the winter when they were there. So, we've always coexisted. And, if you read, old archives or old, journals from like anthropologists, sometimes it was hard to differ. In some region, it was hard to make the difference between someone who was Cree and someone who was Ojibwe, because, there was a lot of knowledge transfer, but also, we would adopt, uh, cultural, um, cultural items from each another, and tattoos and stuff like that. So, yeah, so we've always thousands of years of co-managing the land, co-stewarding the land. I think it's feasible again.
Yeah. Yeah, the diplomatic conversations is valid. Like, that's something I lean into a lot now is, like, how do we diplomatically have relationships and maintain those relationships where even with, like, the settler state, right, not necessarily surrendering or being bullied, but engaging in, like, a diplomatic conversation where, yeah, we could fight if we want, but let's sit down and have a conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like it.
Exactly.
Yeah, you made reference and you mentioned that obviously, your grandmother, and I remember following you when you had this really close relationship with your grandmother and you shared the story of where she also spoke a little bit of Ojibwe. Yeah, tell me about your upbringing and your memories there in your territory because you do have this relationship to your landscape that is uniquely coming from where you're from.
Mhm. And yeah, so I used to spend because when I was young, my father had to negotiate for the Crees. He was the chief negotiator for my nation, so he had to be near Quebec, Quebec City to be near the parliament and the ministries. So during the school year, I was there, but then we would spend mm, all summer out on the land. So we would land by hydroplane in in a remote area on Asinica Lake, which means rocky. There's a lot of rocks, and it's a big lake, and it's hard to navigate if you don't know it because yeah, sometimes it's like there's like you're by boat, and, like, sometimes it's, like, 50 feet deep, and then, well, it goes up to, like, 3 feet, and you have to pull the motor up, so it's quite, it, stands to its name, yeah, really. So, that's where I used to spend my summer with a bush radio and a satellite phone, uh, only being able to travel there by boat or hydroplane, being on, the trap line of a man called Billy Voyageur, from Miss Disney. So, there were Crees, where I was, Crees from Nemska, Crees from Miss Disney, Crees from Ojibwe. So, so I grew up around that, but I grew up very close, to the land, um, being, I feel, aware that, those were that was an important part of who I was, of who my people are, and, and my responsibility to protect, essentially. My parents raised me in a way that made me very aware of my context as an Indigenous person, whereas people at school would make me feel very, very much aware, like we were bullied, all the way, through, elementary at least, and um, a little bit after in high school. But, like the hate comments or the ignorant comments never really stopped. But, so my parents made me really aware that I needed to be able to navigate the systems, I was imposed, um, to be able to survive and to be able to advocate for myself and my people. But they really raised me, very I had a childhood rich in culture, literature. My dad taught me how to read and write. I was 3 years old. So, started to try to understand what he was doing, very early, and just, like, we had those, like, massive, bookshelves in my house, and I would just pick random books to read, and there was all these books on treaties, um, on constitutional law, on history, and, so yeah, I've always been, I'm grateful my parents saw, um, saw took the opportunity to really really give me the most knowledge they could so that I could, um I could survive, and really it helped me, when I was around 20 and I was struggling with homelessness, housing insecurity, with substance use, poverty. It really helped me get out of poverty, rather
Mm,
of like
mhm.
putting myself in these really dangerous situation. I knew I could write well and I knew I had stuff to say. And I wasn't sure if anybody was willing to listen, but Metro Montreal took me in right away, and they were like, "Yeah, we think you, we think you have a lot to say, and you would be a great addition to our cohort of columnists." So, yeah, so basically, writing and um, you know, thinking and questioning really got my head above water for a while and managed to put in place opportunities for me to get out of poverty.
Yeah. Yeah, you made reference there's, like, 3 things here I wanna touch on. One being that you did grow up in, like, on the trap line out in, your territory, and you were spending your summers there. But you also I might correct me if I'm wrong, but that was impacted by forest fires also recently, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, a lot of families, and even back then, I remember being stuck on the island, and the planes could not get to us because there was too much smoke between Chibougamau and the lake we were on, so we could see the fire, like, it was really, really scary. We were stuck in this, like, cabin out on the land with a bush radio, so, yeah, it was pretty rough, but, these things were normal.
Mhm.
But now we have forest fires that are just, like, massive and that burns for so long, and now, like, like the fires from 2 years ago, they burned in the soil so much that, uh, there's, like, landslides there, right now, and, like, whole lakes are disappearing in mud.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hotter fires, bigger fires, like, out of the ordinary fires.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, they're many simultaneously, and they kind of all merged together. When I was in Waswanipi, like, for 1 month, like, it was like the air quality index was at 750, and, like, the subfur was like, "Yeah, well, the air quality is not a reason for you to evacuate." So, I started having asthma, like, just, like, not doing anything, like, I would lay in my bed and I was, like, out of breath. I had to get, like, asthma pumps and, like, literal, like, for for a month, like, literal, like, ash was raining from the sky. We had choppy self-service because they're like the smoke was too thick, and still they were like there was like 5 like one of the biggest forest fire in the province was like 50 miles from us, which was really scary, but there was like we were surrounded by 5 massive fires, so wherever the wind was blowing, like, we would just, like, get smoked, and a lot of us had to evacuate on our own cost, thousands of dollars because, yeah, like, they would evacuate, like, the more vulnerable, but they forgot to put me on the vulnerable list, so bureaucratically, I was kind of yeah, I kinda got, effed over. So I had to evacuate on my so, yeah, it costs, like, I think that's what people don't realize is that, the most impacted by the forest fires and climate change are Indigenous communities right now in Canada, and that it is a it comes at a massive cost for nations.
Mhm. Yeah. Totally, the fallout of climate change is very real.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's interesting too, and then also you highlight, like, this obvious, like, relationship to education, to language, to reading and writing, and I guess that's the conversation I wanna lean into because I do wanna ask about, um I wanna ask about how you prepared a goose, but we'll jump into that later. Your recent adventure of making, goose in was
In
it
the
Montreal?
city.
Yeah, in the city. But I wanna get the trilingual conversation going because that's what's really unique is that I'm kind of like I'm amazed by how much effort is going into language preservation, rightfully so, across Canada today, like in terms of like the TRC calls to action and things like that. But it's leading to it becoming like really institutionalized, I feel. Like go to
Mhm.
university to learn your language, go to university to be a language teacher, cool, whatever. But then at the same time, I feel like there's projects out there where we could look at where communities naturally do so much to maintain their language to begin with. So why don't we look at that or have a conversation in general? Because you grew up in a world and live in a world where trilingualism is normalized.
Yeah, and but what's particular about my region is that we have enough people living off of the land, and we have enough of people, unilingual elders, or just people, speaking fluent Cree, um, to be able to give a traditional education to some people out there, because that's the thing, like, Cree culture is an education, um and it's very thorough, um and a lot of young men have that option in my territory, at least, to not go and pursue post-secondary studies and stuff like that, but they do spend most of the year out on the land with their grandfather or their father, managing the trap line, and occupying the land and living off the land, uh, and being self-sustainable. Like, in my region, it's definitely possible it's easier, I would say, to make that decision, whereas in certain region, I guess, because there's a disconnect from the land, and not many people to teach you. Um, I think it's harder for certain people to make that decision and be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna learn everything by myself with, like, no revenue," and stuff like that. So, and, back in my territory, people have, they get, like, vouchers for gas and stuff like that, to be able to stay on the land. They do have bush kits, provided by the Cree Help Board as well, with training, so that if
Nice.
something happens to them out there, they have antibiotics, they know how to they have the like a big box, like, of medical supply to be able to help their family, or someone at a camp nearby. So, they're trying to teach one person per trap line, at least. So if you get an infection, like skin infection and stuff like that, you don't have to get out of the bush, because a lot of people go there by plane, by skidoo, so it's or by boat, so it's a long drive to go to a hospital, so it makes them able to just last out there much longer for um, injuries or medical, problems. So I feel like it's it's hard. It must be hard in certain regions. So I'm not, like, I try not to impose my reality on other people, and be like, "Well, like, if you wanted to, you would," type but,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I do find as well um that, um, there's a lot, like, everything's become very institutionalized, and it's not because universities put, um like a drum and, like, a medicine wheel in a corner of the university, that it's now decolonized or indigenized.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. And it sounds like your community or this consciousness that you're coming at from your base, your land base, is to get people on the land and make that as easy and efficiently as possible.
Yeah, well, like, and even in Cree territories, like, for Goose Break, all the schools, the offices are closed, and people are on paid leaves to go hunting. Like, the whole nation stops, like, the whole na like, if you're trying to get something from an office, like, in the month of May, like, good luck, because nobody's there. Literally, the res gets empty, everybody's out there on the land, and everything spade, or, like, the schools allow you to do so. So everything everything like the calendar is built around or like moose break for more inland communities. So that's yeah. So I mean it's possible like like our entities put in place um mechanisms for us to be able to do that. But like when you're in university and like you have to take your exams at the same time that like there's goose break and you're like, yeah, I'm Indigenous. Can I go hunting and like take my and have a special, you know, um make a special request for to take my exams earlier. They're like, "Nope." So, yeah, like they say they like they're mindful and try to cater to indigenous populations, but in reality, like it's really, especially when you are so when you're so when you wanna participate into, like, harvests and stuff. They really make it they don't make easy for you, so and a lot of people, like, dread going to school because they're like, "Ah, I'm gonna miss goose break," and, like, they can yeah, and moose break, so it's really hard for youth, for us, sometimes to go to post-secondary.
Yeah, and I guess that brings us to the story of on your Instagram, you recently moved back to Montreal, and I was scrolling one day, dad life, just scrolling, seeing what everyone's up to, looking at stories, and I saw this reel or this story on your Instagram of you preparing a goose in the city.
Yeah, cause okay, so we were in NDG, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, so NDG, they have, like, a municipal bylaw that bans open fire pit,
Mhm.
and that's how we cook goose. We call it shigabon, so it's, on a thread, next to a fire, and it's just, like, you turn them all day and they spin, so they all cook evenly for, like, 4 hours, but then I was like, "Fucking municipal bylaw." We managed to MacGyver something, and it took the same amount of time of cooking, and it was really great. Like, when you know how to do stuff, like, you know, my f my buddy had tried to fix it himself, so I had to, like, go there and rescue the goose but it was it's all right when you know how to do it. So uh fairly easy for me to salvage that goose. But it was yeah, so like when you know how to do stuff even in the city, you really just need a friend with a backyard and try to MacGyver something. So that's what's fun about I think my reality is that I've spent so much time on the land and I'm so I hunt myself. I have my boat, my motor. I have a camp with my uncle. Um, I have my firearms. I have my all my fishing stuff, and I've been fishing. We've had my family had a fishing camp back in James Bay, but before for 17 years. So I learned how to fish very, very, very early. So what's nice about my reality is that um as long as I get, like my friends send me geese from Nunavik, put them on the plane. I just went to cargo to pick them up in Montreal. They were freshly killed, frozen right away. And then I just picked them up there. So as long as there's people and you have a network of people that can supply you with traditional food, EU medium, we call it in Cree. So as long as you have that knowledge, you can make anything happen.
Yeah. That's cool, traditional food networks, I like it. Getting
And
goose sent
even
to
my
you.
like yeah, my Inuit friends are on Sunday I'm getting muskox and Arctic char from my buddy from Kuchoak.
That's
So
epic.
that's really cool.
Yeah. How much effort goes into that, like building your traditional food network? I'm curious because it makes a lot of sense to try and do it today with people from other territories and have these conversations. Like for me, I do negotiate like hunts with people. Like, yeah, I'm going to come up there and do this and that, and we're going to do it together. But you're going to actually like have a food network going on. It sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, the key is to know each other.
Mhm.
And I've always been very inclined to like go out there and meet my fellow indigenous people. And that's something my father like used to tell me when he was going to Geneva to write and adopt the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. That's something he would tell me as a young person, like, "You will find so much strength in knowing, other Indigenous people and having f and traveling and going out there and just getting to know each other. It goes a long way, and it really does. Like, I've every opportunity I've had to spend, time in Nunavik, I took it, and even I would follow him when he would go there, when he go we would go on these travels, um, and just yeah, and just connect with people and just, you know, do my responsibility of, um, always learning from them too, um, and be humble when it comes to other Indigenous people reality, and, you know, just listen and just learn, and I'm super glad I still do that because it brought me a lot of life-changing experience, and it brought me friends that I look up to. Um, it brought me a food network. It brought me, because I'm not living in Montreal by choice. It's because there's the housing crisis. They just gave my house to a bigger family,
Mhm.
and they're like, "Yeah, we don't have any houses left, so you gotta bounce." And yeah, that felt really devastating, and I'm still trying to cope with that, but because I can't be out on the land as much. Before, like, in Waswanipi, I could just, like, wake up at, like, 4 in the morning, go hunting at 5, and then clock in at night, and my partridge were in the oven for my supper later that day, or, like, I would clock out during summer at 5, and at 6, I was on the lake already with my boat, fishing. So, you know, that's why in Montreal, like, there's a big Cree and Inuit community, so at least I get to stay connected. But I have my knowledge. I have the knowledge to make stuff happen, uh, and live out my culture, even if if I'm limited in terms of land access, but and resources. But it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be okay. And you so it sounds unique, right? It sounds unique that you have this experience, you have, where you're at now, and I remember the story of you losing your house and things like that. You were telling me about that, and yeah, now you're living in Montreal, and I think, like, the reality too is, like, life is challenging for Indigenous people, and you've also have this story of navigating these challenges because for me, like, one of the first stories I think I remember seeing you in terms of your media presence was one on sobriety. And of
Mhm.
course, like, alcoholism is something that shows up in our lives in multiple ways as Indigenous people, right? The history of it, the presence of it, obviously, like navigating addictions in general, living on reserve. Like, it's a very real, ongoing conversation for a lot of people. And a lot of people have a personal journey with it, like a personal journey of even choosing sobriety or avoiding it entirely. So, can you tell us more about, what your story like? Because you do have a story, and you made reference to even experiencing homelessness and going through that challenge before in the past.
Yeah, so I had very early struggles with drugs and alcohol. And yeah, at some point, I was looking at my life shortly after being homeless at 23. And I was like, wow, like I've been using since I was 11 and now I'm 23. So it's more than half of my life at this point. And I'm like, I haven't known myself since I was a literal child. And that felt very scary.
Mm.
So at some point, I just decided it was it. And I just quit cold turkey everything. Um, because I was taking care of my grandmother and I wanted to be fully present because she really needed me, and she was a vulnerable elderly lady, and I didn't want my grandma to to smell booze, like, on me, or just not being able to wake up in the morning early to make her breakfast. Like, I didn't wanna be that person. I think I needed her more than she needed me. But, she loved me in a way that was so pure and so simple, and she would just, like, thank me all the time for being there. 'Cause I used to translate, um, at, like, our medical appointments and stuff like that. Like, I had to like, she only knew to speak how to speak Korean, like, when she was in hospital in Chibougamau, like, even in at the clinic in Mistissini, the doctors and nurses, they don't speak Cree. They're mostly people from outside, so, yeah, so that was very, and then yeah, and she loved me in a way that I was never loved before,
Mhm.
and that gave me hope. That gave me hope and self-esteem, like, I think for the first time in my life, I was like, "Oh, I am loved and appreciated,
Mhm.
and, I am useful." So that helped me, get off drugs, and I've never relapsed because, and people are like, they struggle with that in the sense of, like, but when you're like, it's at, you know and, like, they're like, "How do you manage?" Like, "It must be hard to," then it's like, "Yeah, but then when you have, like, when you find a truly profound reason, to get sober, you really stick to it. It becomes, less about sobriety, and it's becoming more about thriving, decolonizing, because, being healthy is a radical act of decolonization for Indigenous people, especially me coming from a community where more than 30% of the adult population has type 2 diabetes. So
Mhm.
it becomes more about these things than, like, just a number of days. And you kind of shift the narrative at some point on, like, and you kinda see yourself differently than just someone who has to be held away from drugs and alcohol, and when you start imposing your own narrative on people as someone with agency, self-awareness, discipline, people don't see you as a ticking bomb anymore,
Mm.
because that's how people perceive, I feel like, um, people who use substances or drink,
Mhm.
like, when they get sober. But you have to shift that narrative about yourself, and people were like people are like, "Yeah, but you will always be a recovering addict," and I'm like, "Actually, I don't see myself that way."
Yeah.
Um, because now staying not drinking and staying off drugs is, like, one of the easiest thing I do every day.
Wow.
So I'm not, like, I don't, like, I feel like that's, like, I've truly evolved from the broken child I was, when I was 23, when I got sober.
Mm.
I'm miles away from that. Now I have tools. Rewired my brain. I have, uh, closer community connection. I have I went in therapy, mm, for so many years every week. I have diagnosis now
Yeah.
too, that I didn't know, like, pretty significant ones too. Like, I found out I had ADHD at 25 and autism at 27.
Mhm.
So I was like, "Oh, okay." So that makes sense. That makes sense why I was using and drinking so much. So I feel like I'm, like, really not, I can't go, like, I will never truly fall back into that life, and I'm not a recovering addict. I won't be like, I don't feel, I don't associate with that. Because I'm a fundamentally different person from when I started being sober. So you have to impose your narrative on people, and the rest follows, But I've never shied away from my experience, because the people I learned the most out on the land, in my community, like my Uncle Red,
Mm.
are, are like, in my community in general, like, they're like, it's people who, people who struggle, And, like, a lot there was this campaign, like, "Not Your Stereotype"
Mhm.
for Indigenous people, and I'm like, "But my most of my family is a stereotype," like, and but they're the most intelligent and um, the most powerful people I've ever met,
Yeah.
and they are so generous of their knowledge, their time, and their love for me that I will defend their dignity at gunpoint.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, you know, people who are the stereotype are some of the most intelligent people I have in my life and key people I have in my life. So I'm never, I don't see I don't see people as I don't see people, through their addictions. I see people through their actions and who they and the relationships I have with them and their outlook and their views on life and so yeah, so it's for me it's always been super easy to and people are like, "Wow, you're so brave." And I'm like, "No, well, it's not to me it's not embarrassing."
Mhm.
And I'm like, it's almost like it's kind of a running gag now. It's like the other day I said crackhead and like this this person was like, well, actually, now it's meth head." And I was like, "Girl, I used to smoke crack." Like, it's not that deep. So, yeah, so, like, it's I don't know, like, it's not something that I'm shy about. Like,
Mhm.
if anything, like, it's something that was key in making the person I am today. I'm so resourceful and I'm so strong-minded and strong-willed, and that comes from being at the bottom of the barrel, literally.
And it's interesting because, in the beginning of our conversation, you painted this land-based relationship, trilingualism growing up, but these narratives and these stories exist at the same time, right? Is no like singular experience. Like
Yeah.
our lives could be chaotic.
Mhm. No, seriously, and, like, I've that's why, like, I learn on the land from people who use and drink while they're on the land.
Mhm.
So it's, it's, yeah, and it's not like a linear kind of experience. Like,
Yeah.
there's many things going on at the same time, but these people are, I don't view them just through the scope of addictions because there are so much more, like, they're teaching me
Mhm.
my language, perfecting my vocabulary, um, teaching me literally how to hunt, gut, cook, game by myself, like, be really self-sustainable and, navigate my territory and giving me the tools to, avoid the Cree nemesis, which is falling through the ice, dying of cold, or dying of hunger.
Yeah, I like the picture you're painting here because we do live in like almost like this black and white take, right? And like this black and white take of like even like the concept of like being clean, right? Which is very like
Mhm,
kind of it gives me the ick because it's almost like implying that the people in our communities are dirty, right?
mhm,
And for me, like working in mental health, working in terms of like, family systems, working with children, is for me what I realize is that the people in the community in our like family systems in our community, it's who we have, whether we like it or not. So we have
mhm,
to be like willing to work with them, right? We got what we got. Like this is it. Like everyone who's living here, everyone who's interacting here, these are our people. We didn't necessarily go anywhere. This is it. Like we're here.
and it's like it's helped me be really, really strong in my sobriety right off the bat because I knew I was always gonna be around people who drink and use,
Mhm, mhm,
but I didn't want to outcast these people and isolate me from these people because they give m they literally bring so much to my life,
mm.
and when they say they do something, they make themselves available, like, even through their addictions, um, and it's, and they will impose self-discipline on them because they know they have, um, they have made commitment of bringing me out on the land and stuff like that, or spending time with me. So, and if it's too triggering, I can just like walk away. But like very early on, people were drinking around me or using, and I was still having quality time with them, having fun, speaking my language, learning things, hearing stories from my grandparents. Um, yeah, I love my relatives, um, who use, and I didn't wanna miss any opportunity of spending time with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so what would you say to somebody, because there is this narrative that people have where it's like, there is traumatic experiences for some family systems, right? That like some of our family systems aren't safe, right? So what would you say to
Mhm.
somebody who's coming at it from that experience or that paradigm, or even just the general paradigm of shaming our communities to the point of where we're perceived as like, all these negative stereotypes and that their minds made up in that way.
I come from a traumatic family context as well, with, um, my parents, and despite that, I've had other relatives or other people from my community where I was like, "Oh my god, I would love to learn how to do this," and they're like, "Come to my camp this weekend. I'll teach you how to do it, and, my wife will teach you how to do that," and taking those opportunities. And yeah, sometimes it's sometimes I was sad that I was not learning from, like, my dad, for
Mm,
example, but, you know, I couldn't, um I wouldn't miss the opportunity to do that because I had an opportunity. So
yeah.
I needed to take it and learn from from whoever I could find to teach me those things. So you really have to build your own system, cultural system and cultural network. Um, but all you have to do, sometimes is ask, at least in my territory,
Yeah.
because we're very like we're very we people still go out on the land. People are still, very communities are fluent in English, in Cree. So
Mm.
it's easy. I feel like it's easy for my, but in the city, it's the same. Like I now that I don't have access to my support system that I've had for the past like 8 years. Um, I still try to make connections with
Mhm.
older Crees, living here, and be transparent about how I miss being home, how I miss eating the food, how I miss, um and yeah, they're like, "Well, yeah, come to my house and we have this or that," and, like, be transparent and not isolate yourself is the best thing, I would say. But I feel like also, like, Indigenous, at least people from my community, like the young, like, people, Gen Z and
Mm.
stuff like that, they are so anxious. Like, they barely leave the house. They have, like, mad social anxiety,
Yeah.
um, where it's even hard to, like, talk to people. So I'm like, so that's something that's a new, like, that's kind of a new reality.
Yeah.
Um, like a lot of kids staying at home, being online, and just like, yeah, just have like, uh, debilitating anxiety that keeps them from creating community.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you summed it up there where it's like, well, if these family systems aren't safe, or if people aren't safe, then you gotta find the safe people. You gotta build
Yeah.
the community. You gotta build a network, right? And you're demonstrating that by this unique food network where people are sending you food, and you get out there
For
and you
me, everything.
interact. Yeah. Like you get out there and you connect, right? You find those connections in your territory and your land, or with people who are like-minded.
But then that's always been my ways of staying alive, is to stay is to is to is to find community.
Mm.
and find reasons to live through um, people who embody, uh, values or or discipline that I really look up to.
Mhm.
But it's always been to find connections that are so meaningful that it helps me get out of bed every morning. And whenever life gets tough, I just go out there and seek those people. Now that I have the means to travel once in a while and to or now that I have the connections to spend time in the Arctic and stuff like that. Or um and yeah, whenever life feels doomed and the world feels doomed, I seek connections
Mm.
and life-changing experiences through other people, to help me keep going. And yeah, like I feel like I've always done that, even though, like, even when I was poor and
Mm.
even when I was homeless,
Mhm.
um, connecting on a at a deep level with other people really helped me find meaning and find hope in my life, for sure.
Yeah, and you brought up too how you are while you were at the stage in your life where you learned as an adult that you had ADD, that you are on the autism spectrum. So what was that like? How did that impact your journey? And then what did it feel like? Because it sounds like you got a lot of hindsight clarity, because I remember we did have a conversation where you said that, yeah, I figured this all out and this is what's shifting for me.
Yeah, I mean, it made sense why I used to drink so much to override the social anxiety that I had. It made sense that I was on stimulants because helped me perform like minor tasks.
Mm,
So, like, it all made sense, but also, like, when I got my autism diagnosis at 27, like, you kinda realize that your whole life, you people were gaslighting you, calling you lazy or, weird, or, you get bullied and stuff like that, and, like, all these experiences, you start to connect the dots, and you're like, "Wow." And you knew it was hard to live your daily life, but people didn't seem held you s to the same standards, and even higher standards than all the other kids or teenagers or young adults, and you're like, "Wow." And I've worked twice as hard because it's twice as hard for me to do these things, and surviving capitalism as an autistic people is absolutely horrifying. Um, Especially when you have, like, those that uh, non-recognition of it, like, hierarchy and, like, in the professional world and stuff like that, like, just, like, but yeah, so I went through what they called skills regression, because I was like, "Wow, finally, my whole life I knew I wasn't crazy, and I knew that I was having difficulties, but people dismissed that, saying that I was just, like, giving myself excuses and stuff like that. So, like, my body went into, yeah, for, like, a year of, like, it's like, wow, so now that you know that you've been masking your whole life and struggling, your body kinda does, like, the opposite, where it refuses to mask. So things that I was able to do, like going to the store and, like, alone and, like, stuff like that, like, just I needed to relearn how to live because I was, like, just, like, really isolated in my house, or I would just, like, go out on the land with, like, certain people, and, like, it would get everything work was getting more overwhelming, and, yeah, it's just like I went through this, you my body just refused to do stuff that I really worked hard on to be able to cope with, like, in therapy, that, like, it's just, like, but my body was just, like, telling me to, like, yeah, to my was finally, like, letting itself not fight it. Um, but it was hard. It was hard, but at least I had, like, my uncle Red who would, like, drop by, or he would call me every day. He's like he's like, "My niece, where are you?" I'm like, "I'm home, I'm depressed." And he would, like, or he would, like, come by, drop by, and, like, my like, we don't lock the doors, out on the rest, so he would just walk in, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm depressed." He's like, "Okay, I hadn't seen you in, like, 3 days, so I just wanted I just wanted to see how you were doing." Or he would send, like, my cousin Edgar to check up on me. So, like, I was really not isolated that much, um, when I was in community, and it was really, really much easier to navigate being autistic in my community, because Crees, we don't stare at people in the eyes, we don't we don't do small talk. You don't look at someone when they're speaking, and they still know that you're listening. Um, there's all these social codes that in the city, it's so, like, oppressing. Like, you don't like, you talk to someone and you just look in a different direction, and or, like, they speak, and, like, you're looking at, like, your feet or something like that, and they're like, "Listen to me with your eyes." And especially when you're a woman, they're like, "Smile, be nicer, look at me." And, "Oh, you're so much prettier when you smile," and, like, your stuff like that. So, but we don't have that in Cree communities, and, like, I could just, like, be, like, socially awkward and not talk. Like, sometimes me and my uncle Red, we're at camp together, and sometimes we were in the same camp, and we wouldn't talk for, like, 3, 4 hours being in the same room. And then he was like, your grandmother once told me that," and then would say a super deep, like, story, and I was like, "Huh," and I was just, like, not react to it right away,
Yeah.
because that's the Cree way of thinking. Like, you're gonna think about it for, like, a week after, and then you're gonna come back on that
Mhm.
story the week after. And we would just, like, chill, like, keep fishing, we were sitting on the porch smoking a cigarette,
Mhm.
and we would not go and talk for another 2, 3 hours. So it was really much easier. It was less demanding to function in society, in my community, than it is in the Quebecois society, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool because, yeah, those cultural social cues, I feel some people don't know what they are, but when you know what they are and they're very like they're unique and they're helpful, right? Because I could relate to that too, where with our most loved ones, you often sit in silence. Like you don't have to fill the silence with anything. Like,
No, and it's like, at some point I was dating this white guy, and he was at camp with me and my uncle, and he was like, "Yappa, yappa, yappa." And at some point I was like, you don't have to talk, right?" And he was so offended. I'm like, "No, but it's true." Like, and over there, like, people always tell me that I'm too blunt, like, when I'm in the city,
Mhm.
but I'm like, "Why would I?" Yeah, like, all of those, like, those politeness standards that aren't really politeness standards, because it doesn't mean you respect someone.
Mhm.
Um, you know, in Cree communities, respect is being honest.
Mm.
And me saying, like, "Yeah, I don't agree with you," or "I don't like that," doesn't mean that I hate you as a person, and then life goes on. But, like, here like, I work with non-natives, and sometimes it's hard to, like, navigate those insecurities that they have, uh, with, like, social interactions and stuff, because they assume a lot of things, and I'm like, "No, if I say something, that's what it means," like, so, yeah, it's fun, because I have a lot of, at the Cree Health Board, I have a lot of Cree coworkers, most of them are, so So it's nice because I get to speak, yeah, 3 languages at work, but also, like, have to I can have, different social codes throughout the day with,
Mm,
different people, so it's kinda
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool, and you're highlighting it for, I feel like, our radical narrative listeners too, because I mean, I did an interview with my girl's auntie down from Oklahoma, and she talks about how even in their Kiowa culture, that you get told like straight up, like if you're doing something wrong, and there's an honesty in that.
Yeah, and, like, people who mess up, like, in in their communities, like, there's, like, non-native, like, teachers and nurses, and then they fuck up, and then so they're like and then they get told, and they're like, "Oh my god, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry," and, like, they keep saying, "I'm sorry," and people are like, "Stop saying sorry," like,
Yeah,
and just don't do it again, and then they get even more sad and, like, hurt,
yeah.
but I'm like, "No, it's he's just telling you it's not that deep," like, and they're like, it's so funny to see people try to and it's like but it's like, how like, why are you so insecure and
Mm,
stressed? Like,
mhm,
we're just other human beings, like, it's not that hard to like, they get super stressed about, like, talking the right way to us or behaving the right way in front of us, and I'm like, "Yo, like, it's like, what's going on? It's not
yeah,
that deep, but I think, it's part of the part of the white guilt experience maybe,
yeah.
but, and it gets like I'm like, "Chill, we're just another human being." Like, well,
Mhm,
if both parties, um, work on the same basis of trying to understand each other, they'll find a way.
mhm, yeah,
I would teach little, like, I would write on paper, like, phonetically, questions and answers for the white nurses who would take care of my grandmother at night when I wouldn't be there, and this, like, young nurse from France, uh, like, at some point, she's like she asked my grandmother, "Shtaksuna." Your head like, and then my grandmother, like, would reply, and I was like, "Yo, you like, you're just like, look at you, like, just speaking Cree,"
yeah,
and, like, because they really wanted to because, like, they cared, like, and felt, so, they cared so much about my grandmother and wanting
mhm,
to understand her and understand her needs that they would go out of their way and just try to find a way to understand her and
mhm,
would actively seek the tools with me, so that we could work it out together.
yeah,
Um, and sometimes, like, up until the day she died, like, sometimes at night they would someone was with if no one was with her at night, um and she wouldn't sleep because of dementia, they would bring her to the nurse station, and they would, like, fill in the reports, and, like, they would just, like, put, like, warm blankets on my grandmother, like, fresh out the dryer,
mhm,
and they would bring her around, like, just because she wasn't able to sleep, so instead of, like, leaving her alone
mhm,
in her room
mhm,
and that she tries to, like, get up and, like and she was blind, so, like and falls, and, like, they were like, she's not we're just bringing her, like,
mhm.
down at the nurse station, so
Wow.
and sometimes they would comfort her and, like, stay, like, go in bed with her and, like, try to get her to sleep and, like, reassure her, and I was just like, "Wow, that's like" but because they were very like, people in Shibugmo are more, I feel, um, they see Cree people every day. They've known Cree people their whole life, and they have Cree friends, most of them, um, so I feel like they understand the importance of and the context of it, but, yeah, like, if you truly mean to understand someone, you're gonna find a way. So that's why, like, when I see people trying to challenge me on just my dignity and the dignity of my people, I just don't engage with that because, I know they're not trying to understand me, and I'm gonna choose my dignity, my time,
Mhm.
rather than try to knock some sense into these people.
Valid. That's valid. That's cool. And then yeah, these social indicators are like like it's really cool to hear you give context to them, especially from like somebody who's autistic, right? Because that's a big like dynamic in the Western world is that people tend to shame or analyze autistic people from the perspective of their social cues. But you're kind of just saying, fuck it, I'm Cree, this is who I am, and this is how I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, and like I will rock my resting bitch face proudly, and I will be socially awkward, and I will be, like that's now like I feel, and my parents have have raised me in a way that I was very particular as a child, and I was
Mhm.
getting bullied for it, but my mom kept not kept trying to shield me from that because she wanted me to, if I wanted to go to school costume, that she would let me, because she didn't want to she didn't want to dim that magic in me, and
Mhm.
that the the quirkiness of it just for other people. And my mom, like, she was like, and I'm the youngest one, and she was like, "Maite, having a child like you was a gift," and she was
Mhm.
like, "You it was magic to have you as a child." I'm getting emotional because, my mom and my dad have always over celebrated the fact that I was different, and I was like, "Yo, that's
Mhm.
weird," like, but now I'm like, "Wow," because it really they never made me, um feel ashamed, and they never made me feel like what I was doing would not be would be frowned upon, like, in society and stuff like that, and they just let me be who I was and who I wanted to be, and do whatever I want, and express myself the way I wanted to, and, yeah, I gotta thank them for that, because I used to go to school and, like, would get bullied and wouldn't mind it, like, very much at first, because to me, these people didn't care, and I was raised in a way that's so, like, I was that was, like, centered around my gaze and not the gaze of others,
Mm.
and, yeah, so I really thank my parents for that,
Yeah.
because now I celebrate and express myself in a way that's so unapologetic, and that's what shines through, in the end, and that's why
Mhm.
that's why people like me, because I'm honest, I'm blunt, I'm sort of like, I'm, edgy, I'm radical, and
Yeah.
it's because, yeah, my parents truly made a good job at drilling that in my head to be whoever the fuck I wanna be.
Yeah. I like it. I like it, especially hearing at it like, hearing it from the perspective of being a father now. Like, I like everything you said there. And I always say, like, you'll be awesome on radical narrative, like, the 2 definitions of radical, right? Because we use the biological term for this podcast where it's like you're literally planting the seed for people to learn, planting the seed for people to begin to analyze these things, and I always knew you had this unique perspective and experience in life that I value too as a friend, right? And I guess I'll ask one of the last questions here where it's like, what is your value system now? And what are your philosophies that you would want to tell people based off your life experience?
Um, Civil disobedience, for sure. Um like, I always joke about that with my dad. I'm like, I'm wonder if we have the same CSIS assigned agent. Like, is it an agent assigned to the family, or do we have our own
Mhm.
agents? But civil disobedience, direct action, um, truly are stuff that I try to embody.
Mhm.
Um, and especially now that I'm in the city, I'm back in the city. It articulates in a different way. Um, so yeah, like, um, I find a lot of the native representation in capitalism or politics is bullshit,
Mhm.
and not doing anything. Like my former grand chief is is now the minister of Indigenous services, and she's still not saying anything about Bill C5. She's not saying anything, and was telling during campaign like, yeah, I'm doing this for I really believe in Mark Carney. Like, girl, like, guy sounds like Brian Mulroney, but okay, like,
Mm.
guy promotes like a vision of this like dystopian oligarchy in his book that is so fucked up and so far away from our traditional values, and talking about Canadian national interest. I'm
Yeah.
like, girl, like, so I've always, yeah, I'm less and less. I'm trying to I'm really trying to stay away from changing the system from within, because it's not good. It's not working, and it's not even buying us time anymore. Like, fascism is literally at our doors,
Yeah.
um, where, yeah, like, we have responsibilities to, to, be bold and be blunt and be unapologetic and firm and pragmatic, um and to me, being pragmatic also means being angry.
Yeah.
Um, that's one of the thing that late Murray St. Clair told me personally. He's like, being angry is not a bad thing. It's gonna get you through. It's gonna get you through a lot of shit in your life. And he's like, anger is gonna keep you alive, and at some point you're just gonna find a way to canalize it into something that's not self-consuming.
Mhm.
But people are like, why are you, and like, aren't you so tired of being angry and stuff like that? And I'm like, it doesn't kill, it's not killing me, and it's not making me sick, because to me it's defending my dignity.
Mm.
It To me, it's me choosing my people and loving me and loving my people, like, to the way of, having visceral reactions to it. But to me, it just shows love and how much I care and how much I am alive. And we always tone police people, like, even in our communities nowadays, like, oh, we were a Pacific people. I'm like, "Seriously? Tell that to, like, the Blackfoot, the Dene, the Inuit." Like, we were never, like, a passive, and, like, Chief Poundmaker rolling in his grave right now as you saying this, like, we were, mm, mm, we had, um, no, we were militarily, like, organized, we had diplomatic relations, we we fend for ourselves, as Crees, and, like, that's so that I refuse to believe in the good, peaceful kumbaya, uh, Indian that always speaks, in a calm way. No, like, I get really passionate when it's about my my integrity, or the integrity of my people. And, yeah, that's something that I thank Murray, because even as we were lobbying for 262 back then, C262, spent a lot of time with him. And, we've had, you've told me a lot of things um that, changed me fundamentally, and was one of the people who really saw it, like, in higher, in important, spaces, important parliamentary and settler spaces, who saw my rage and
Mm.
and made me hold it so that everybody could see it, and made me hold it in a way that I'm proud and not ashamed of my anger, of how people were perceiving me.
Mhm.
My father is like that too. Um, Never scolded me for for uh for acting the way I would act and being who I was, and just um, yeah, like, it's something that I try to, more and more to embody and let myself be, but, absolutely, if rage is gonna keep you alive, you're better off angry than dead
Mm.
or numb, and because anger also puts you in action sometimes, and sometimes you're so angry, you're gonna go back to your community, you're going to go back to the land, you're going to learn your language. You get so frustrated, you get so so I feel like anger puts you in action, so I refuse to not acknowledge it whenever it comes to me because, yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard to capitalism is hard to navigate these days.
Yeah.
So, let ourselves be angry.
Yeah, feeling your emotions. And I like how you're giving this like analysis here subtly where it's like, we're in a time where we do need to act, where we do need to be angry. And it is frustrating to see, some of the political takes in this like very Mark Carney era that are sort of leaning or trying like old tactics, but we're in a time where we literally do need to organize and mobilize in a way where, like, I like what you said is how, like, Crees organized militarily, they organized diplomatically. Like, we were literally fighting. And,
Mhm.
um, and that's something we have to remind our people of, I think, in this era, because there is this like turn the other cheek religious undertone that sort of takes place now that is ultimately like a foreign belief system.
Yeah, and, like, I really celebrate and welcome this rowdy and resi part of me in, like, even when I'm having, like when I'm on discussing politics in the media or, in settler spaces, um, where I'm like, I'm not fucking around with it, and, that's just who I am, and I'm not ashamed of it. Might come across as rude for some people or eclectic, but, yeah, no, I spent my teenagehood and early adult years hating myself, and I'm never going back to that, because loving myself as and being angry and not being ashamed of it really has uh, brought a lot of good and health to me. I find it healthy to, uh, to let it out, um, so yeah. That's what I would encourage people to do, like, they want you passive, and, like, Ellen Gabriel was on this panel the other day, and they were like, "How do you think, during the election campaign," and they were like on the panel, they were like, "Yeah, so how do you think, uh, Indigenous people can contribute to saving the Canadian economy and fighting back the tariffs in the US." And she was like, "I'll be damned if I ever if I ever help their economy." And I was like, "Girl, yes." Because seriously, like, fuck their Canadian economy. What has the Canadian economy done for us? Like,
Mhm.
um so that's why I'm and shout out to Leah Gazan who's been championing the rhetoric um in parliament for C5 and calling out
Mhm.
that bullshit um because um because it's important because that's to me it's a testimony of love and self-respect when we stand up to that bullshit. Like, love yourself, goddammit.
Yeah, totally, totally, and yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of voices of resistance emerging. I feel that people need to connect the dots and find them because there's a lot of voices of, like, passivity taking place and a lot of strategic planning from the federal government right now and even the provincial governments to isolate, people who are going to take a stand and go with the voices that are gonna endorse or support, Canada.
It's like a lot of us too are like in the communities are watching like the live stream genocide of Palestine, not saying anything.
Mhm.
Like I lost an uncle in a residential school. Like he never came back. He's still buried in another province. My dad's been to residential school for 10 years. Um, Truly fucked him up. Um, and fucked up my relationship with him for my entire life. I think. And that's I'm like, every child matters also applies to Palestinian children.
Yeah.
Um, and why are you not saying anything? And why do you have this weird attachment to the Holy Land that's now in somehow stewardship of Israel, but
Mhm.
that has been in stewardship for of Palestinians for the longest time and did a very good job at protecting it. Um, you know,
Mhm.
for those that matter, for those who it matters to. But yeah, why are we so complacent? And why is our nation, who's having like a direct seat at the table with Canada or in their provinces, not fucking saying anything?
Mhm.
Like, like sometimes I'm like, like, yeah, it's frustrating. So really, like, to me, like, those who are resisting right now, who are calling out that bullshit are the people who truly love themselves truly have humanity in them. Um, but it's weird what being at the heart of the empire does to people,
Mhm.
even the oppressed. Like, the cognitive dissonance is real.
Yeah. Yeah, valid. Yeah, I like it. Is there any closing comments you wanna give? Because you gave us a lot to think about. You talked about your experience, your upbringing. You gave us some pretty solid political analysis, and, I like it. I knew you'd be an awesome radical narrative guest, and maybe you should be one of our political analysts or a panelist in one of our coffee houses or something.
I would say free Palestine. I would say free Turtle Island, and I would say Mark Carney can catch these hands.
Nice. Awesome. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everything you said.
Well, thank you for the invite, and hopefully I'll be back.
You will be. We'll work on another episode to unpack some of these pretty epic concepts, and let us know when your book's coming out or your podcast.
All right.
Thank you, Maïtée.